Shalom, holy initiates and holy adepts. Welcome to Gate 6 of my series on Shabbatheanism. I must say that I think this will probably be the last gate on this introductory series on Shabbatheanism. This series was simply meant to be an introductory series into Shabbatheanism, because that is not to say that I will not be doing future videos on very, very advanced teachings straight out of, very deep Shabbatheanism. I plan to do some videos in the future that are extraordinarily advanced and require very high initiation and some very, very lofty and very sublime wisdoms and knowledge, which has only been known among the Grandmaster Shabbateans, you could say. So again, I think this is probably going to be the last gate to this introductory series. Now, for this gate, prerequisites that I think are quite requisite to fully understand much of what will be talked about here are the two videos that I've done. One of them entitled "The Most Esoteric of Arcana Behind Sefer HaZohar," where I truly reveal the true arcana behind Sefer HaZohar, as well as the great arcanum and mystery behind Rashbi. We need to understand, as you will understand in these videos, that the vast majority of individuals, in this last generation who claim to be Kabbalists, there's many Jews, mostly a lot of Jews that claim to be Kabbalists, which are inferior Kabbalists. I like to call them second, third, maybe fourth order Kabbalists. They have no connections to the Holy Illuminati, probably don't know of its existence, and are not fully initiated. They don't truly understand the true quintessence of Sefer HaZohar, what the book is really about, what's truly going on. They don't even know the great arcanum behind Rashbi. And what I find very lamentably is that over 99%, I want to say, of individuals in our last generation who claim to be Kabbalists are not fully initiated Kabbalists, meaning they are very inferior Kabbalists. And that's very, very lamentable, very, very, very lamentable, very, very sad. It's just, I guess all I can say is I'm quite speechless as to how many inferior Kabbalists are out there, and how there are really practically no really true grandmasters that I'm aware of, at least out in the open, so to speak, other than really myself. So with that said, we may continue here. Now, I want to begin just by speaking on some few points on Sefer HaZohar, which in translation signifies the Book of Illumination. And this is to be emphasized. I want to greatly emphasize, what Sefer HaZohar means. Zohar is a very ancient Hebrew word signifying illumination. Okay, because this has everything to do with the Illuminati and who are the Illuminati, right? What does Illuminati mean? It's a very nice, fancy term for individuals who are truly illuminated with the great divine light. Okay, and we have many of these, conspiracy theorists and all these people, especially in this last generation, because it is the last generation, who like to throw out this term. It's been thrown out for a number of decades, as referring to the Luciferians that run our world. But in fact, they are not illuminated individuals. They are not the true Illuminati. They are very darkened, evil individuals. And so this term has been misappropriated for just too long. For the longest, for hundreds of years, this term has been misappropriated to the wrong organization, to the wrong set and group of individuals. This is a term that has strict and exclusive reference to the true Illuminati, which are the true holy saints and the most elect of Hashem. Okay, and our most ancient principal text, very esoteric, Sefer HaZohar, is the Book of Illumination, because this very powerful divine book illuminates the individual who is mastering and reading and studying that book. Okay, now the exoteric author behind it, many of these scholars, I like to call them pseudo scholars, because they're like people looking, at things from the outside. They're not insiders. The scholars are not the insiders. They're the outsiders. People like me are the insiders. Okay, and so they're outsiders. Like somebody looking from the outside is what they are. They're not like me, who's somebody who's on the inside looking within the inside. Okay, now according to many of these pseudo scholars and other individuals, right, they like to ascribe the authorship of Sefer HaZohar to a very preeminent Jew named Musha de Leon, who was from Leon, Spain. Now, Leon, Spain was an autonomous province in northern Spain, and Leon is actually Spanish for lion. So you have to very wisely consider this title or this name, Musha de Leon. Okay, because this is what I like to call it. This is what I like to say is the exoteric author or face behind Sefer HaZohar, right? As holy initiates and holy adepts, as I have already said in other videos, Sefer HaZohar was redacted by the Holy Illuminati. This is a great secret. But exoterically, it was just taught that, oh, it was Musha de Leon. There's sort of this, I guess you could say, dichotomy going on with regard to Sefer HaZohar. On the secret level, which is only known by the holy initiates and adepts, we know that it was redacted by the Holy Illuminati. But for all the profane, we ascribe its authorship to Musha de Leon, which is a very cryptic title that would only be understood by the true holy initiates and adepts, right? Who is Musha? Musha was an Israelite who was the chief magician of Egypt. Now, understand this very well. Musha was an Israelite, specifically a Levite, but he was garbed in Egyptian robe. You could almost say like a convert to the ancient Egyptian theosophy. So what we have is a very, very powerful, very preeminent Israelite Levite, or priest really, who is garbed in Egyptian robe. I've explained this great mystery in other videos. It has everything to do with the klipot. Because he is an archetype to all of the elite subsequent Israelites, specifically Israelite grandmasters and Israelite true initiates and adepts, who would convert and be garbed in foreign, strange, alien robe. Because many of the members that belong to the Holy Illuminati, many of them grandmaster Jews, converted to Edom and garbed themselves in Edomite garb and robe. Consider this very, very wisely. You need to understand this very, very well. Because Musha was an Israelite who was garbed in Egyptian robe, and many of these grandmaster Jews who belonged to the Holy Illuminati were garbed in Edomite robe. This is the significance of the name of this grandmaster, Musha de Leon. De Leon from the lion. Well, we all know as initiates and adepts that the lion is the seal and symbol of the divine royal messianic bloodline, or the bloodline of HaMashiach. So Musha de Leon is telling you two things exoterically. One, we are dealing with a grandmaster Jew of the Holy Illuminati who is of the royal bloodline of Beth Dawid. He's a son of King Dawid. And as I've already stated in another video, it was many of the sons of King Dawid, my bloodline, that were responsible for safeguarding, preserving, and guarding these very ancient holy mysteries that even far predate Yeshua Bar Yosef. Very critical to understand all of this. Now, holy initiates and holy adepts, many of them in the Hebrew are called, Zoharites. We know Zohar means illumination, so these would be Zoharites. Those who are votaries of this most ancient principal esoteric book are illuminists in essence. And so our goal is to enter and master Sefer HaZohar, and thus enter and become connected with the Holy Illuminati. Knowing that the Holy Illuminati really at the highest level consists of very powerful divine entities and beings. I also want to mention that having this very base understanding of what Sefer HaZohar means, that it's a book of illumination, that we are illuminists, that we're dealing with the Holy Illuminati here, the true Holy Illuminati. We also need to understand that Sefer HaZohar is also a very esoteric text, okay? You have to put things into context. It began in the 1200s. From the 1200s to about the 1500s, it was a very esoteric text that was only in the hands of the most elite Jews in manuscript, for the most part in manuscript form. The Sefer HaZohar was not first printed until around 1560. So only about 300 years after its redaction was it actually officially printed for the Jewish masses, so to speak. Even then, even if it was printed in book form, it didn't mean that every single Jew had access to it. Okay, it just opened its access more, so to speak. Now, principally, it was published under two primary editions initially in the 1560s. Which the first was the Mantua edition, which was done by Jewish publishers, but with the help of the Holy Illuminati, meaning there were holy illuminists that did help these Jewish publishers in publishing the Mantua edition. Then we have the Cremona edition, which was published by actual holy illuminists. These were Christians and Jews working together side by side in Cremona that worked to further redact the text and publish it. And these Christians and some of these Christians and Jews did belong to the Holy Illuminati and were highly initiated Christians and Jews side by side. We also need to understand that there was a huge controversy when in publication, since the understanding was that this is a very esoteric book that is only meant for the few elite intellectuals. This was the understanding by many Jews and even by Christians. So there's a huge controversy because this book has, for the past 300 years, it's been a very esoteric book in the hands of the Jewish elite. And now we're talking about publishing it and opening up for the masses, essentially, in Europe. So there's a huge, massive controversy. Again, I don't have the time and space to get into it here, but there are scholars and books that do speak on this in further detail. Now, I want to begin by mentioning a very momentous Christian illuminist, because when I speak on the Holy Illuminati and their operations in Europe during the Middle Ages, we have to understand that this Holy Illuminati consisted of not just Jews, but also Christians. Some of these Christians were highly initiated Christians who were Israelites, even though they may not have understood or known it. And one such individual who's at the top of the pyramid is an individual named Nor van Rosenroth. And he was probably the most initiated Christian adept. I would almost go as far to say he was a grandmaster in Europe and well connected. Now, you need to understand that this Christian grandmaster was fluent in ancient Hebrew and Aramaic, had mastered the Talmud, the Midrashim, even the Kabbalistic texts. His teachers were not Christians, but Jewish grandmasters. He was taught, initiated, and trained by actual Jewish grandmasters, not stupid, ignorant Christians. Okay, you need to understand this. There were many Christians that did become initiates and adepts through Jewish grandmasters. This is one such individual. Okay, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into a little bit more details here, but you need to understand this very, very well. Now, he absolutely belonged to the Holy Illuminati, and he was the most well-connected illuminist in Europe at this time, Gentile illuminist, I should say. And he's well-connected to the most elite, to the most elite, regal bloodlines of Europe, meaning the kings and princesses of Europe, as well as the Jewish grandmasters, as well as the Christian Edomite elite, so to speak. He was a highly well-connected guy, very, very powerful Holy Illuminist at this time, okay? And he printed the actual first Latin translations of Sefer HaZohar in a book entitled Kabbalah Denuta in 1684. Duly note this year, because it is a most momentous year. So if you've seen my previous skates, you should fully understand the implications and ramifications of this year, 1684. Okay, now this Latin book, Kabbalah Denudata, was included, essentially it included English translations of three very, very powerful, extremely esoteric sections of Sefer HaZohar, which are the Idra Rabba, the Idra Zuta, and the Sifra Detziniuta. I just butchered that Aramaic word there. But essentially it included the English translations of these three sections in Sefer HaZohar, which are the most powerful and most esoteric sections in Sefer HaZohar. Cannot emphasize this enough. These sections are so ridiculously advanced that they are, really not properly and holistically understood by even the vast majority of Jewish Kabbalists that understand. This is a fact. I can tell you right now that over 90% of Jewish Kabbalists that study these sections do not fully understand what is being relayed here in these texts. This is a fact. Only grandmasters have proficiency and mastery over these very esoteric texts. Okay? And we also need to understand that Nor van Rosenroth was preceded by Christian grandmasters before him, names like the Grandmaster Pico della Mirandola and Johann Reuchlin. Now, Pico della Mirandola was a grandmaster of grandmasters, I must add, a Gentile at that as well. And again, if you don't know if these names don't ring a bell, if you don't know who these names are, you probably shouldn't be watching these videos, because these videos are intended for true holy initiates and adepts. And if you're a true holy initiate and adept, you know who these individuals are and you have studied their texts. Okay, these are highly initiated Christian grandmasters here that we are talking about here, and these are the predecessors and fathers of what we would call the Christian Kabbalah, although it's a misnomer because the Kabbalah is the Kabbalah. Okay, there's no such thing as Christian Kabbalah or Jewish Kabbalah. Really, Kabbalah is Kabbalah. It's ancient Hebrew esoteric wisdom going back, going all the way back to the antediluvian aeon, etc. Anyways, it was very powerful and very preeminent grandmasters like Pico della Mirandola and Johann Reuchlin that paved the way for Nor van Rosenroth when he came on the scene, because he's coming on the scene during a very spiritually energetic messianic time. Okay, wink, wink, hint, hint. We're in the late 1600s here. Okay, the generation of Shabbatai Zvi. Okay, I'm going to get a little deeper here into this. Now, we're speaking on the Holy Illuminati, which Nor van Rosenroth was probably the grandmaster of the Gentile section of the Holy Illuminati, very well connected to the European royalty, and as well as highly initiated Jewish grandmaster converts into Edom. And this small section within the Holy Illuminati, which included Christian grandmasters and Jewish grandmaster converts, were known as the collaborators. In his Latin translation to his Kabbalistic magnus opus, he actually signs it with the name the collaborators. In other words, he's saying these editions and these very holy esoteric texts that are being published is all a product of quote unquote the collaborators, which was the covert or exoteric name given to the small order within the Holy Illuminati that was doing the bidding of the Holy Illuminati in this very messianic spiritually charged generation. Okay, because Nor van Rosenroth, or I should really say the collaborators, were working on the most complete and perfect edition of Sefer HaZohar. Up to this point, there were only two standard editions, the Mantua and the Cremona edition, which leads us to speak on the Sulzbach edition, okay, which is the most complete and perfect edition of Sefer HaZohar. It was a product of the Holy Illuminati in 1684. And it was solely intended for Jewish initiates and adepts who were converts and the Christian elite, the true Christian initiates and adepts. Okay, because we have two types of initiates and adepts during these Middle Ages. We have the Christian initiates and adepts and the Jewish initiates and adepts, and they're working hand in hand, side by side together. Okay, and it was van Rosenroth along with the Jewish grandmasters that got together, worked together in collaboration to produce the most complete and perfect edition of Sefer HaZohar. Okay. This book had an introduction. In this complete and perfect edition of Sefer HaZohar, they had many textual variants of the text included in this edition, as well as a very pristine introduction, as well as a commentary to it, as well as to a dictionary on top of that, and other texts included within this edition. So this is a very super complete and perfect edition of Sefer HaZohar, probably the most elite divine edition of Sefer HaZohar. Okay, and it was also this edition of the Saltbeck edition was published in 1684, and in that same year that this edition was brought together and published, that same year, Kabbalah Denudata, the Latin translation of Norvan Rosenroth, was also published. And that same year, the Tikah Data was also published, which was the Syriac/Aramaic New Testament. And this was all part of the Messianic Kabbalistic mission of the Holy Illuminati. We're in the same generation as Shabbatai. Mashiach has now come on the scene. Another powerful incarnation of Mashiach, Shabbatai, is on the scene, fulfilling his Messianic destiny. At the same time, the Holy Illuminati has now produced the most complete and perfect edition of Sefer HaZohar to be published for the masses, for the Christian elite and the Jewish elite to read, as well as Christian and Jewish initiates and adepts. On top of that, there is a Latin translation of the most esoteric sections of Sefer HaZohar that is also published for the Christian initiates and adepts to study and read alongside the original Sefer HaZohar. On top of that, the Syriac/Aramaic New Testament is also published. This was all intentional because all of the Jews who are now going to have access to and read Sefer HaZohar, they also want them to read the Syriac and Aramaic New Testament. Because it is only through studying and understanding the Syriac New Testament that they'll be able to understand Sefer HaZohar, the true ancient, pristine theosophy. At the same time, the Christians are encouraged to study the Syriac and Aramaic New Testament to better understand the Aramaic of the Zohar. Everything is interconnected. Again, this is all part of a very powerful, divine, Messianic, Kabbalistic mission of the Holy Illuminati. Okay? I'm hoping that many of you listening are true holy initiate adepts, that I've said more than enough for you to understand what's going on here, what this is all about, what the goal, what the end result and goal here all is. Okay? Now, I want to read you here a few excerpts from some of the things that a couple of Christian grandmasters said in relation to this great Kabbalistic divine mission. Now, Van Rosenroth says in his Kabbalah Denuta, I have the citation at the bottom of the slide, he states, "When I thought about convincing and converting the Jews, I observed that no small obstacle arose from the fact that they either do not understand our terminology or equally that they shrink away from it, thinking it strange and absurd. When afterwards, however, I spoke with them using their own expressions, I always gained their open ears, and I obtained the opportunity to expound to them by means of the gentlest exposition all the mysteries of Christianity which had formerly seemed so absurd to them." This is why it was very crucial and momentous for the Christian world at large to study the ancient Jewish literature, especially the esoteric literature, to better open a dialogue with the profane and uninitiated Jews. The converted Grandmaster Jews and Jewish initiates and adepts are already up to speed. They already know everything that's going on. This is intended mostly for the profane and uninitiated Jews, as well as the profane and uninitiated Christians, because we're talking about the Holy Illuminati here. Consider all of this very, very wisely. He also goes on in the same book, again citation below, he states, "I have often eagerly desired that their more profound theology, e.g. the Kabbalah, would become known to many of our faith, and that our rabbinical studies would not come to a standstill at mere grammatical observations, by which means at length the Jews would be able to read our writings and gradually be drawn back into the way of truth." Okay? This is not just the Holy Illuminati's mission. The Holy Illuminati is on the payroll of Hashem. This is all part of Hashem's Grand Master design plan. Okay? Messianic plan, really. Okay? And again, these things that he's saying, were all part of the goal of his predecessors, vis-a-vis Pico de la Mirandola, Johann Reuchlin, and others. They were trying to encourage the Christians to get them into higher levels of initiation and consciousness, but they failed. Much of the Christian world, much of these very inferior goyim, remained stupid, remained ignorant, chose stupidity and ignorance. You had the Christian elite, the true Christian elite, trying to take Christianity to the next level for over 500 years or more, and they failed because the Christian world was not ready, or I don't know what was going. Maybe Lucifer won, I don't know, but it failed. These levels of initiation and consciousness, I guess, in the end, were only attained by a very few small handful. Very, very unfortunate. Now, the Christian, I mean the European, royal prince Christian, August, writes in his book, in Specimen Theologica Zohidikea, I'm butchering the Latin here, but he states in his book, and understand that Christian August, was like a very close contemporary of von Rosenroth, who again was, I guess you could say, part or very close to the Holy Illuminati. And he writes, recently we received in our residence, for the purpose of publishing, a Hebrew book entitled the Zohar, which is believed to be the oldest of all books possessed by the Jewish people, and which is esteemed by them more than the Talmud itself. It reputedly contains much that agrees with the Holy Scriptures of our New Testament. By means of this work, the Jews could be persuaded that in the Christian doctrine of the divine persona, the Messiah, the law, and its inner significance, grace, and other points of conflict that stand between us, there is nothing that would prevent them from converting to the Christian faith. And what he says here is, of course, absolutely true. Of course, this is all stuff that was only understood by the whole Illuminati at the time, and it was part of their divine Kabbalistic mission to get this knowledge and wisdom out and open to the masses. Now, this is where we're now going to proceed to speak on the Shabbateans. Okay, this is why this is Gate 6 to Shabbateanism, okay? Because this is the secret invisible hand pulling the strings behind everything that's going on here at this time, okay? Now, we need to understand that the printing of these holy texts took place at the same time that Mashiach Shabbatai's ministry was beginning, literally. This should not be lost on you. The implications and ramifications are staggering, to say the least. Now, many converted Jewish grandmasters at this time are Shabbateans. You need to understand this, okay? The Amsterdam and Constantinople editions of Sefer HaZohar were exclusively established by Shabbateans in the early 1700s. Constantinople at this time was up to the neck full of Shabbateans, so to speak, as was Amsterdam. So we got to put things into perspective here. Many of the grandmaster Jews that are training and teaching the Christians and working alongside the Christian elite, alongside the Christian initiates and adepts and even grandmasters, are Shabbateans for the most part. Okay? In 16, and I'm going to give you some proofs here of this invisible hand of Shabbateanism working its way to, in working its way to this very divine Kabbalistic mission of Hashem and the Holy Illuminati, right? In 1684, the Shabbateans published, or really they were responsible for the first edition of Chaim Vital's Sha'ar Gilgulim being published. Sha'ar Gilgulim is one of his 8 gates, which is the gate of reincarnations. And this book was first published around in 1684, and it was all through the power and work of the Shabbateans. Now, what's very interesting as part of the proof here is that Nor von Rosenroth included a Latin translation of this text in his second edition to Kabbalah de Nudatata. So again, everything is interconnected here, and I'm just revealing to you here the invisible hand of the Shabbateans in all of this, okay? How is it that Nor von Rosenroth was able to produce a Latin translation of Sha'ar Gilgulim at this time? The only way he could have access to such a text was to have been in close contact with Shabbateans, which of course he was. This is the great secret. Now, let us speak on the Grandmaster puppet masters at this time, which are all Shabbateans, right? We need to understand that the base of operations of all the Shabbateans in this generation is Smyrna, Turkey. And who was the Grandmaster and the puppet master that was pulling all the strings, that was training and initiating many of the Christian elite, many of the Christian initiates and adepts? Well, Nor von Rosenroth never reveals the names of the true grandmasters, of the true puppet masters. He keeps them secret, and for good reason. But he gives you a few hints if you have eyes to see, if you are truly initiated, if you're a true holy initiate and adept, and you know how to read between the lines. In his magnus opus, Nor von Rosenroth omits his master's name, and he states the reason being is that it is on account of the hatred of his relatives and co-religionists, which is twofold. One, it's very forbidden for a Jew to teach the esoteric wisdom to a goy, but more importantly, because his master was a Shabbatean. Now, you need to duly note what the Prince Christian August said in his writings. He said explicitly that the Jews hold the Zohar over the Talmud. This should not be lost on you, because this is only the case with Shabbateans. This is only the case with true holy initiates and adepts. Only the true holy initiates and adepts hold Sefer HaZohar in greater esteem than the Talmud, than the Talmudim. Because there are contradictions between the Talmudim and Sefer HaZohar. In fact, I have a relative who doesn't know much about the Zohar and doesn't put much great emphasis on the Zohar, because he's a standard Orthodox Jew, and he holds the Talmud in much greater esteem than the Zohar. And there are many ignorant Jews that are like this, and all they have to do is cite contradictions between the Talmud and the Zohar. Of course, they're not initiated, they're too ignorant to be able to reconcile these contradictions and to fully understand what's going on. The Shabbateans are the only group. They're the only true Jews that know the great secret that the Sefer HaZohar is to be held in greater esteem, holiness, and divinity than the Talmud. This is a fact. You can't consider yourself a true Jewish Kabbalist if you do not hold the Zohar in greater esteem than the Talmud. But at this time, this is only the case with the Shabbateans, because all of the other inferior Jewish Kabbalists, when there is discord between Talmud and the Zohar, they will side with the Zohar. The halakha for many centuries among the Jewish Kabbalists was, when in crap, I cannot find the word that I'm looking for right now, but when you are in, I guess you could say, in a state of uncertainty, you choose the Talmud over the Zohar. That was the halakha. When in uncertainty, you choose the Talmud over the Zohar. I'm very upset right now that I cannot find the word that I was looking for. Oh, this always happens, but you get what I'm trying to say here. That was the halakha, and very, very sad, because that goes to demonstrate that these were inferior Kabbalists that were not fully initiated and had no idea what was going on. Okay, so very, very critical to understand that point that Christian August mentions. Okay, now another momentous point, really proof, is that Van Rosenroth's translations. I mean, we have to ask, of all of this, of Sefer HaZohar, of all of the sections, why choose these three sections? These three sections that Van Rosenroth decided to translate should not be lost on anyone. The reason is very simple. They were regarded by Shabbateans in the highest regard. This should not be lost on you. Of all of the sections of Sefer HaZohar, these three sections were held in the highest regard by Shabbateans. In fact, the Shabbateans commanded all of their followers, initiates, and adepts that they must study these sections daily. That is how momentous they considered these texts. And let's face the facts, they absolutely are. Of all of the sections of Sefer HaZohar, these three sections are probably the greatest, most divine, most powerful sections of the entire Sefer HaZohar. In fact, Lurianic Kabbalah, even the Lurianic Kabbalah understanding this, spent much of its time in expounding these sections. So, which is what makes the Lurianic Kabbalah the most advanced school of the Kabbalah, next to Shabbateanism. Okay, in fact, they were so popular and so highly regarded that they were translated into Ladino by many of the Shabbateans. Now, Ladino, if you don't know, which you should know, is a modern dialect of Hebrew that is a mixture of Hebrew and Spanish, which I myself, being a Sephardic Jew, quite fluent in. So you need to, you have to understand and put all this in perspective and context and see how all this is interconnected, because in the end, it was the Shabbateans, which is where all the grandmasters are to really be found, were the ones who were pulling the strings of all of this entire very divine, Kabbalistic mission at play here. Well, it looks like that's the end of this presentation. So I hope that you have learned a lot. I have a link at the bottom of the video to a paper that was written by a very highly esteemed Israeli scholar on much of what I have taught in this video. This paper that this Israeli scholar wrote is all about the Salzbach edition and the Shabbatean invisible hand behind the Salzbach edition of Sefer HaZohar. I think many of you should, if you have further interest, you should definitely read this very top-notch article by this Israeli scholar. So with that said, shalom.